Imagine standing in the most glittering palace on earth. Gold reflects off every surface. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing light across marble floors. The greatest minds of Europe gather in salons to discuss art, philosophy, and power. This is Versailles under King Louis XIV, the Sun King himself. The palace is so magnificent, so breathtaking, that people called it the eighth wonder of the world. Kings traveled from across Europe just to glimpse its splendor. But here's the thing that makes this story unforgettable. While nobles walked these gilded hallways laughing and feasting, something was happening in the shadows. Women were whispering in bedrooms. Poisons were being mixed in hidden rooms. And the king's most trusted people, his closest allies, his dearest lovers, were buying these poisons from fortune tellers operating right underneath the palace itself. By 1679, the King of France, the most powerful man in the world, would discover that his entire court was built on a foundation of secret betrayal, hidden magic, and murder. And when he finally tried to cover it up, over 100 people would disappear, their names erased from history, their bodies buried in unmarked graves. This is the true story of the affair of the poisons, the scandal that nearly destroyed the monarchy itself. The investigation that followed would be one of the largest witch hunts in modern history. Worse than Salem, more brutal than anything Europe had seen before. A special tribunal called the Chambre Ardente was created just to handle the cases. Over 5 years, 319 people would be subpoenaed, 194 would be arrested, and 36 would be executed. But here's what makes this even more chilling. Many of these people weren't actually guilty. They were tortured until they confessed to crimes they never committed. They were executed to protect a secret so dark that King Louis XIV himself ordered the records sealed forever. So before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The truth of what happened at Versailles is about to unfold, and it's far darker than you could possibly imagine. To understand how this happened, you need to understand what Versailles was really like in the 1670s. King Louis XIV had created this palace as a tool of control. He forced the most powerful nobles in France to live there, where he could watch them, manipulate them, and prevent them from starting rebellions against the crown. It was brilliant but suffocating. These were men and women used to running their own estates, commanding their own armies, making their own decisions. Now they were trapped in a palace competing desperately for the king's attention. Every moment of the king's favor meant power, money, and influence. Every moment he looked away meant ruin. In this pressure cooker of ambition and jealousy, people got desperate. Women especially. In the rigid social hierarchy of 17th century France, noble women had almost no legitimate way to gain power or influence. They couldn't lead armies. They couldn't hold political office. Their only tool was their beauty, their connections, and their ability to secure a powerful man's love. And so when a woman felt that love slipping away, felt that another rival was taking her place, she began to look for other solutions. In the shadows of Paris, a network of women had emerged offering exactly what these desperate nobles needed. Fortune tellers, alchemists, midwives who could disappear unwanted pregnancies, and poisoners. They called their most popular product the poudre de succession, the inheritance powder. Fine white arsenic, tasteless, odorless, leaving almost no trace in the body. A woman could slip it into her husband's wine. A nobleman could add it to his rival's food. The victims would waste away over weeks, and nobody would ever know. The story of the affair of the poisons actually began in 1666, years before it would explode across Versailles. A noblewoman named Marie-Madeleine Marguerite d'Aubry, the Marquise de Brinvilliers, was living a life of excess. She and her husband gambled constantly. They were deep in debt. They had expensive tastes they couldn't afford. But Brinvilliers had a solution. Her father was wealthy, and he was standing between her and a massive inheritance. So she did something calculated and cruel. She began visiting a charity hospital where poor and elderly people were treated. And while she was there, she would bring them pastries. Pastries laced with poison. She was practicing, testing different formulas. Her lover, a man named Captain Godin de St. Croix, was a natural alchemist who understood poisons. Together they perfected a recipe for aqua tofana, an arsenic-based poison so refined that it would kill someone slowly, subtly, making it look like natural causes. When Brinvilliers felt confident enough, she stopped practicing on hospital patients. She came home and she poisoned her father. Then she poisoned both of her brothers. She watched them die over weeks, their bodies breaking down from the inside. Also, she could inherit their estates. She might have gotten away with it forever, except for one mistake. In 1672, her lover St. Croix died. When authorities inventoried his possessions, they found letters from Brinvilliers. Incriminating letters. Letters that detailed everything. The poisonings. The formula for aqua tofana. The whole conspiracy. Brinvilliers was arrested in 1675. She was tortured. She confessed to everything. And on June 17, 1676, she was burned at the stake in Paris. Her body turned to ash as thousands watched. But something unexpected happened after Brinvilliers died. The investigation into her case didn't stop. Instead, it expanded. As police questioned people connected to her, they began hearing names. Names of other fortune tellers. Names of other poisoners. Names of nobles who had bought poisons. The most important of these names was a woman named Marie Bosse. When police raided her apartment, they found something shocking. Arsenic, Spanish fly, powdered menstrual blood, nail clippings, all the ingredients of dark magic and poison combined. Bosse broke down under interrogation. She admitted that she had sold inheritance powders to a noblewoman who wanted to get rid of her husband. She had sold love potions to desperate women. She had connections to dozens of people. And when she was asked to name her suppliers, she gave one name above all others. Catherine Deshayes, known as La Voisin. This name would change everything. La Voisin was no ordinary street healer. She was wealthy enough to throw lavish parties. She could move freely through the highest levels of Paris society. She was a midwife, an abortionist, an alchemist, and a fortune teller all in one. But most importantly, she had clients in places that terrified the police. She had clients at Versailles. She had clients in the royal court. And some of those clients were the king's own mistresses. In 1679, as the chief of the Paris police, Gabriel Nicolas de la Reynie, began closing in on La Voisin, he realized he was uncovering something far bigger than a simple poisoning network. La Voisin's home became a window into an entire underworld that existed right beneath the palace of Versailles. She had been selling love potions. She had been arranging black masses, ritual ceremonies where priests performed sacrilegious rituals supposedly to summon dark forces and grant wishes. And there were whispers of something even darker. Stories that during these black masses, infants had been sacrificed. La Voisin herself would later claim, though her testimony was given while she was drunk and tortured, that she had disposed of thousands of babies in an oven in her garden before burying them. Whether this was true or exaggerated by torture, nobody knows. But what was absolutely certain was that La Voisin had connections to powerful people. Women desperate enough to buy love potions and hire priests to perform rituals. Women willing to try anything to keep the king's attention. One name kept appearing in La Voisin's records over and over again. Madame de Montespan. Madame Françoise Athénase de Roquecourt, the Marquise de Montespan, was the king's maitresse and tighter, his chief mistress. She had been with him for years. She had given him several children. But by the late 1670s, something terrifying was happening to her. The king was becoming infatuated with younger women. His attention was wandering. And Montespan, who had built her entire existence on being the king's favorite, felt herself slipping away. She was desperate. Desperate enough to turn to a woman like La Voisin. When police arrested La Voisin in 1679, they tortured her. And under torture, La Voisin made confessions that would shock the entire court. She claimed that Madame de Montespan had come to her not just for love potions. She claimed that Montespan had asked her to arrange black masses. Ritual ceremonies where priests would perform sacrilegious rituals supposedly designed to keep the king's love fixed on Montespan alone and away from her rivals. La Voisin claimed these rituals had involved the use of prostitutes' babies. That these infants had been sacrificed as part of the ceremony. That Montespan herself may have attended these masses. Now, historians today dispute many of these claims. The evidence is murky. La Voisin was drunk and tortured when she confessed. Many of her accusations may have been inventions designed to save her own life by implicating someone more important. But what matters is what King Louis XIV believed, and what the court believed. Because the moment these confessions became public, the entire court turned against Montespan. Whispers followed her through the corridors. Nobles who had once courted her now avoided her. The woman who had been so powerful, so adored, so central to court life suddenly became radioactive. And the king, faced with the possibility that his beloved mistress had been buying poisons and arranging dark rituals, made a decision that would define the entire scandal. He ordered La Voisin burned at the stake. On February 22, 1680, Catherine Deshayes, La Voisin, was executed by fire in Paris. Her body turned to ash like Brinvilliers before her. But the king knew that executing La Voisin wouldn't end the scandal. So he created something unprecedented. In April 1679, Louis XIV established the Chambre Ardente, the burning chamber, a special tribunal created specifically to investigate and prosecute everyone involved in this poisoning conspiracy. This was unlike any court that had existed before. It wasn't bound by the normal rules of evidence. It wasn't open to the public. Confessions obtained under torture were considered valid. And the tribunal's sole purpose was to find and execute anyone who had participated in the poisoning network. Over the next 3 years, this tribunal became a machine of terror. It held 210 sessions. It issued 319 arrest warrants. Of those, 194 people were actually arrested. The arrests spread like a wildfire. Fortune tellers were arrested. Alchemists were arrested. Midwives and abortionists were arrested. Defrocked priests were arrested. And slowly, the arrests began climbing the social ladder. Men and women of rank started being hauled in front of the tribunal. Some fled. Others, hoping to save their lives by cooperating, testified against their friends and patrons. The atmosphere at Versailles changed. The glittering palace that had once been a place of endless celebration became a place of fear and paranoia. Nobody knew who would be arrested next. Nobody knew if a casual conversation they'd had with a fortune teller years ago would condemn them to death. And the tribunal kept executing people. 36 people were executed in total, but many others died in prison. Others took their own lives rather than face torture and execution. Still others fled France and spent the rest of their lives as fugitives on the continent, never able to return home. By 1682, something began to change. The tribunal's zeal started to wane. The execution slowed. And then, the king made a decision that revealed the true nature of the scandal. He ordered the investigation sealed. Not closed. Sealed. The records of interrogations were locked away. The testimony of witnesses was hidden from view. The full scope of who had been implicated, what they had done, and what the tribunal had discovered would be kept secret from the public forever. And importantly, Madame de Montespan was never formally tried. She was never convicted. She was never executed. Despite all the confessions that implicated her, despite La Voisin's accusations that she had bought love potions and arranged black masses, the king protected her. He couldn't afford to have his former mistress executed. The scandal would have been too enormous. So instead, she was allowed to fade from power. She was banished from the king's bedchamber. She lost her position as maitresse in titre. But she wasn't killed. She lived another 40 years after the scandal, long enough to see the king die, and she retired to a convent in 1691, an old woman finally out of the spotlight. The woman who replaced Montespan was Madame de Maintenon, a pious, respectable woman whose very presence seemed to bring order and morality to the court. And so the scandal was buried. The bodies of over 100 people were dead or imprisoned or exiled. The records of the tribunal were sealed away. And for centuries, the full truth of what happened was hidden from history. Historians still argue today about what really occurred at Versailles. Was La Voisin really selling poisons? Or was she mostly selling love potions and hope? Did Montespan really arrange black masses? Or was this the fantasy of a woman under torture? Were any of the deaths actually caused by poison, or was it all paranoia and hysteria? The evidence was destroyed. The records were sealed. The truth died with the people who were executed. What we do know is this. The affair of the poisons was one of the largest and most brutal prosecutions in French history. It claimed more lives than the Salem witch trials that would happen 10 years later in Massachusetts. It infected the entire court with paranoia and fear. It revealed how fragile even absolute power really is. And it showed how quickly a person could be erased from history if those in power decided it. The women who operated in the shadows, the fortune tellers and midwives and poisoners, they were making money off desperation. They were exploiting people who felt powerless and trapped. But they were also providing a service that women in that society desperately needed. In a world where a woman's entire worth was determined by whether she could keep a man's love, where losing that love meant losing everything, these underground practitioners offered hope. They sold the possibility that you could control your fate, that you could win, that you could survive. And when the tribunal burned them to death, when they were tortured into confessing to crimes they probably didn't commit, the court condemned not just criminals, but people who had understood the desperate hunger of women trapped in a system that gave them no other way to survive. The affair of the poisons was not just about poison. It was about fear, power, betrayal, and the lengths people will go to when they're desperate and trapped. And it was about how those in power will destroy anyone, execute anyone, destroy any truth to protect themselves. So I want to know what you think. Looking at this story, do you believe La Voisin and the others were guilty as charged? Or were they sacrificed to protect people more powerful than themselves? Let me know in the comments. And thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.